Here's the pitch every town council in America has heard at least once in the last 3 years. A tech company shows up with a map, a handshake, and a promise. Give us your land, give us a decade of tax breaks, and we'll bring your town jobs, tax revenue, and a shiny new piece of the AI economy. Sounds like a no-brainer, right? Here's what actually happens. The US Chamber of Commerce looked at the real numbers across 244 large data centers in 16 states. During construction, these projects genuinely do employ people, an average of 1,688 workers. Sounds great. But once the building is actually finished and running, that number collapses to an average of 157 permanent jobs. 1,688 down to 157. And in a lot of rural deals, researchers at Georgia Tech found the real number sits under 100 permanent employees total for a facility that just got handed hundreds of millions of dollars in local tax exemptions. So if this isn't really a jobs business, what actually is it? Today we're taking apart the real economics of a data center, what it genuinely costs to build one in the AI era, where the actual profit hides, and the truth about why this industry keeps expanding into small towns that will never see the return they were promised. Because the real story here isn't about servers. It's about something far more valuable and far more contested than any of us usually think about: electricity. Let's start with the raw size of this thing. Globally, there are roughly 12,000 data centers in operation, including about 500 genuinely large-scale facilities, adding up to around 135 gigawatts of total capacity. And that number isn't projected to grow modestly. It's projected to roughly triple by 2035. In 2024 alone, hyperscalers, meaning Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and a handful of others operating at that scale, spent around $210 billion specifically on AI-driven data center build-out. And the pace is only accelerating. US data center construction starts hit $77.7 billion in 2025, which is a 188% increase compared to the year before. One single month, July 2025, saw $14 billion in new construction starts, more than the entire first half of that year combined. Here's the detail that matters more than any of those big numbers, though. 3 companies, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google Cloud, account for 63% of global cloud revenue. This entire industry, at the scale that actually matters, is being built by a handful of buyers with essentially unlimited capital, competing to secure land, power, and construction capacity before their competitors do. Everyone else in this industry, landowners, regional operators, construction firms, even entire state governments, is essentially negotiating with a handful of giants who genuinely hold almost all the leverage. Let's talk real numbers, because this is genuinely one of the most capital-intensive businesses on this entire channel. A standard data center, the kind built for regular enterprise cloud workloads, now costs somewhere between $10 and $12 million per megawatt to build, and that number has climbed nearly 47% in just 6 years, up from around $7.7 million per megawatt back in 2020. But here's where it gets genuinely extreme. An AI-optimized facility built for the kind of dense compute that trains and runs large AI models runs $20 to $40 million per megawatt once you include the specialized cooling and power infrastructure these chips actually require. There's a metric industry analysts now track specifically for this gap, and as of this year, it sits at 3.3 times, meaning an AI-ready megawatt costs 3.3 times as much to build and equip as a standard one. Put that in a size you can actually picture. A mid-sized 50 megawatt facility typically runs $400 to $600 million total. That's before a single customer signs a lease. Electrical systems alone frequently eat 40 to 50% of the entire construction budget. Substations, switchgear, redundant power paths, grid interconnection. And that leads to the single biggest bottleneck in this entire industry right now, one that no amount of money can simply buy your way past: power availability. grid interconnection delays are now stretching construction timelines by 24 to 72 months at some locations. Read that again, up to 6 years, just waiting for the local power grid to be able to physically supply the facility. Land is available, capital is available, construction crews are available, power is not. And that single constraint is reshaping where this entire industry is choosing to build. Here's where a lot of people misunderstand this business entirely. They picture rows of blinking servers and assume the revenue comes from computing somehow, in the abstract. It doesn't. The revenue model here is closer to commercial real estate than most people realize. Stream 1, co-location leasing. This is the traditional model. A company rents rack space, power, and cooling inside your facility for their own servers. You're essentially a landlord, except instead of leasing square footage, you're leasing power capacity and thermal management. Pricing here is typically quoted per kilowatt per month, and it scales directly with how much power-hungry equipment a tenant needs to run. Stream 2, hyperscale leasing. This is the model driving almost all of the growth numbers we just talked about. A hyperscaler, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, signs a long-term lease for an entire building or an entire campus, often locking in 10+ years of guaranteed revenue before construction even finishes. Vantage Data Centers, for example, committed $25 billion to a single Texas campus spanning 2,000 acres and 2 gigawatts of capacity. That's not a spec building hoping someone shows up. That's built specifically because a hyperscaler already signed on the dotted line. Stream 3, interconnection and network fees. Once you have tenants inside a facility, connecting to internet exchanges, cloud on-ramps, and other tenants inside the same building becomes its own revenue line, often carrying strong margins because the infrastructure to support it is largely fixed cost, already built into the facility. Stream 4, managed services. Monitoring, security, disaster recovery, and technical support layered on top of the base lease. For co-location-focused operators specifically, this is often where genuinely differentiated margin lives, because it's service revenue on top of a real estate asset, not just the real estate itself. Here's the number that ties this whole revenue conversation together. To hit a reasonable 10% return on investment, a 30-megawatt facility needs to generate around $100 million in revenue. That's the scale this business actually operates at. Not thousands of small transactions, but a handful of enormous long-term contracts with the small number of companies that can actually afford to sign them. Now for the cost side, because this is genuinely one of the more unusual cost structures you'll see across this entire channel. Maintenance. This typically accounts for around 40% of ongoing operating costs, by far the single largest recurring expense. Redundant cooling systems, backup generators, uninterruptible power supplies, and the physical infrastructure that keeps a facility running at the 5 nines reliability level enterprise customers expect all require constant upkeep. Electricity, running 15 to 25% of operating costs. And this is the line item creating genuine political tension right now. In the PJM grid region covering much of the Mid-Atlantic, capacity market prices jumped from $30 to $270 per megawatt day in late 2024, and now sit around $330. If current projections hold, Virginia residents specifically could see their average monthly electricity bill climb from around $143 today to over $315 by 2039, largely driven by data center power demand straining the regional grid. That cost isn't hidden inside the data center's own operating statement. It's being quietly passed on to regular electricity customers living nearby. Labor. Here's where this business looks almost nothing like every other video in this series. Labor is a genuinely small slice of ongoing cost, which loops directly back to our hook. These facilities are, by design, some of the least labor-intensive structures in the entire economy. That's exactly why the "this will bring jobs" pitch falls apart on closer inspection. The entire design goal of a modern data center is maximum automation and minimum staffing. Land, water, and local infrastructure. Cooling systems, particularly for AI-dense facilities, can require enormous water volumes, and land acquisition in power-rich regions has become genuinely competitive. Beyond the facility's own footprint, New high-voltage transmission lines and substations are frequently built solely to serve a single campus, with local ratepayers and taxpayers absorbing much of that surrounding infrastructure cost. Annual operating costs for a mid-sized private facility typically land somewhere between $10 and $25 million a year, a genuinely enormous ongoing number, but one that's dwarfed by the construction cost that came before it and easily covered by the long-term hyperscale leases we just talked about. Power.
Constraints can strand your entire investment. We already covered the 24 to 72-month interconnection delays. Now imagine you've already poured the concrete and the grid still can't deliver the power your facility needs. That's not a hypothetical, it's happening at real sites right now. Technology obsolescence is accelerating, not slowing down. A facility built for standard cloud workloads a few years ago may not have the cooling density to handle today's AI chips without an expensive retrofit. In an industry moving this fast, future-proof is closer to a marketing phrase than a real guarantee. Local backlash is a genuinely growing political risk. Communities are increasingly pushing back over water usage, noise, strained infrastructure, and rising electricity bills, and that pushback is starting to show up as real zoning fights, moratorium proposals, and increased scrutiny on the tax breaks that got a project approved in the first place. The incentive math often doesn't hold up to scrutiny. In hyperscale-heavy counties, tax incentives represent only about 2% of total construction investment, meaning the tax breaks weren't really the deciding factor, power and land access were. But in co-location-focused counties, incentives can represent up to 62% of total investment, meaning the facilities generating the smallest employment benefit are often the ones receiving the largest relative subsidy. That's precisely the mismatch fueling growing political scrutiny across multiple states right now. Overbuilding and speculative risk is real, even at this scale, with hundreds of billions of dollars chasing the same AI infrastructure trade simultaneously. There's a genuine possibility that some regions end up with more capacity than actual demand for years, particularly if AI compute demand growth ever cools from its current pace. And environmental scrutiny keeps intensifying. Water consumption, carbon footprint, and grid strain are increasingly showing up in permitting fights and public opposition campaigns, adding real delay and cost risk to projects that look straightforward on a spreadsheet. Section 6, how the big players actually win, 1400 to 1500. The pattern here is more concentrated than almost anywhere else on this channel. This isn't an industry where a small operator gradually scales up to compete with the giants. It's an industry where the giants essentially set the terms from day one. Hyperscalers lock in power and land years in advance, sign leases that guarantee revenue before a single brick is laid, and use their scale to negotiate construction and equipment costs no independent developer could match. Everyone else in this ecosystem, regional co-location operators, construction firms, even state and local governments, is largely competing for a smaller slice of infrastructure built to serve those few giant tenants. So, is a data center actually the community jobs machine it gets pitched as? Based on the real numbers, honestly, no. 157 permanent jobs on average is not what most towns picture when they approve a decade of tax exemptions and hand over prime land near their power grid. But here's the truth underneath that truth, that this was never really a jobs business in the first place. It's a power and capital arbitrage business, dressed up in economic development language because that's the pitch that gets zoning approvals passed. The real value being built here is control over scarce electricity capacity, locked in multi-decade leases with a handful of the wealthiest companies on the planet, and land in the small number of places where the grid can actually keep up with demand. The operators who genuinely win in this space understand that from the start. They're not selling jobs to a town council, they're securing power contracts, signing hyperscale tenants before construction even begins, and building an asset whose real value has almost nothing to do with the employment numbers on the press release. If this breakdown gave you the real picture behind an industry that's reshaping small towns across the country right now, subscribe, because next time we're taking apart the economics of a completely different business. And there's a similar gap between the pitch and the truth hiding in that one too.